In this video, you are going to learn about lists. Lists are another data type. They're a little bit similar to matrices, like you learned in a previous video, but there are also some important differences. First, let's make a new heading for lists. A list lets us group together different modes of data into one structure that we can then move around with in R and work with. If you remember, whenever we worked with matrices, a matrix, like a vector, requires or asks us to use data of the same mode. And in our examples, we use numeric data or numbers. We just use numbers. Lists let us put together numbers, words, or logicals into one structure, and then it lets us move that structure around and work with it. Let's put together some examples in order to make this a little bit more real. First, let's create some small data structures that we can put into a list, and we'll save them to variables. So first we'll make a matrix, and we'll call it temporary. And in matrix temp, we will save a matrix just like the one we made in the previous lesson. So first we put in the data, and then we call the number of columns. Let's do 2 columns, 2 rows, and 10 columns. This is our matrix. And if we run just this code, we can see what the matrix looks like. And when we run the whole code, we create matrix temp. Next, let's create a temporary vector, number 1. And we're going to assign this a vector with just numbers. So this is a numeric vector, and we'll just drop some numbers that we like in here. Add some spaces to make it more readable. Again, if we just run this code, we can see that this is our vector. And when we run the whole line, we create our vector. It's a numeric vector. Let's create another vector with words in it. We'll call it vector temp2. We'll create it with the same syntax, our C parentheses, which is our vector syntax, or our vector code. And now we'll put hello and goodbye. If I run just this part, you can see that hello and goodbye are in our vector. And when I run the line, now we have a character vector, CHR, with 2 elements, hello and goodbye, the 2 words. So here we have data types that are of different modes. Here we have a character vector, here we have a numeric vector, and here we have a matrix that is of the type integer, which is similar to numeric. So 3 different modes. What if we want to put these together and then be able to use them in our code to pass them around, to do interesting things with them? We could create a list. We would type list, and then we would open parentheses, and we would type the names of these variables that we want in our list. So we have matrix temp, we have vec, and whenever you see this drop down, it's helping you write the variables that you've already created. So you can either click like this, matrix temp 1, and go on, or you can use the arrows on your keyboard to go up and down, and then you can press tab. to bring it up. It helps you write code faster. So here we have our 3 smaller data structures, and we're putting it into one data structure so that we can move all of them around together. I run this code, and now you can see that this list exists. The first part is the matrix, the second part is the numeric vector, and the third part is the character vector. Let's save this to list save and run the code again, and now we can see that we have list save and it's a list of 3. And if I click this, I can see what is going on inside the list. What if I have a list and I want to work with different parts of it? This list is ordered just like a matrix or a vector. It's ordered, and we can use the indexes. And indexes are numbers that help us get data out of a data structure. Remember, with the indexes, with the matrix, we would just open up the brackets and do maybe 1, 1 to get the first 1 out. The indexes start from 1 and go to the end of your data. Lists are a little bit different because you're dealing with different data structures inside a bigger data structure. So for that reason, we need to use 2 sets of brackets, 1, 2, and then if we put a 1 and run the code, it gives us just the matrix. It gives us just the element in the first position. If we do something similar again and do 3, gives us our character vector that's in position 3. Now, what if I want to use this code again? Whoops. I'll copy it, paste it, and what if I want to get some value out of this matrix? After I put the matrix here, then I open up more brackets, and then if, say, I want this 15 here, I would type 1, 8. And then when I run this code, I get back to 15, because here in list, I've gotten the first element, which is the vector, this vector up here, and then I've gone into the vector and using the indexes. 1 means row, 8 means column. So first column, 8th row, I get the 15 out. The last thing we'll go over is how to name the different parts of your list. And this can be done fairly easily. If I have this list, you can see that the 3 different parts are just, they're called by their more technical names. So this is an integer matrix, this is a numeric vector, this is a character vector, but that's a little bit hard to understand if you're trying to understand your code. So we can create a new list. We'll call this list save 2. We'll use the same syntax from earlier, just borrow it and assign it here. And then in order to name each of these, to give them each a name, we would open up parentheses like this and use the equal sign. So we'll call this matrix, we'll call it 2 row 10 column matrix. We'll call this vector, how about a numeric vector? And we'll call this a character vector. You can name these anything you'd like. Now when I run this code, I get a new list here. It's still a list of 3. And when I open it up, you can see that each one has names now. So here it's just kind of the technical information, but now you can see that I've added names. And when I go and maybe print, if I go and print list save to, you can see that the names have been added above each of these parts of the list. And the last thing we'll quickly go over is now we can get things out of here without needing to use just the indexes. We can use a different kind of code that uses the names of these and the $sign. So we can go to list save to, for example, and then we can type the $sign. And it automatically gives us options that we've named already. So let's just do the 2-row 10-column matrix, which is what we call the matrix. And when I run this code, I get the matrix returned.